Now, that Act of Congress of 1871 was an act of misprision by and the foreign feudal law entity, which was born of treaty treason, was filed as the United States Corporation Company, which is now commonly referred to as the U.S. democracy. You know, that's important for people to know that. And so, by them not knowing that corporate platform is actually the Roman Curia operations of the Jesuit order of the Inquisition. And it's interesting how you can even give people copies of the corporation papers for the United States Corporation, but they have been brain trained into thinking that the United States U.S. democracy is the physical aggregate body politic country, which it was not and is not, and actually belongs to the Vatican. And it's really interesting how, while all of that is documented, how difficult it is to get people to do the research and to look at this information on their own and change their state of mind. They recognize that taxes are not inevitable and that they actually never apply to them.
That's probably what a lot of people are wondering. So if they do not apply to us, how do we avoid them, circumvent
Now,
them, get out of,
now,
not be
didn't the Bible
entangled with
say get out from under her?
that? Yeah, but
Now
how?
we're talking jurisdiction.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
so now you got to look at what we talked about before, linguistic capital, which is where they use the capital letters writing people's names, which the people don't know, and grammar designates them as a corpse or the dead. And then, of course, the vampire lives off the blood of the dead. And this is another expression in the rituals that they use of sacrificing actual human bodies and drinking their blood, where they do the ritual of the cracker, and then they say the wine represents the blood.
Communion.
Actually,
Communion.
yes, communion. And most people never suspected that this was actually a ritual of their actual
Human
activity
sacrifice. Yeah.
of torturing humans, etc. But again, again, not knowing that the government agencies that they've been calling government were actually subdivisionals of the Vatican. So you can see why almost every time the so-called city councils and legislators uh, for the United States or their subdivisional states of entities, every time they make a legislation, it's always a tax attack against the people. And it hasn't dawned on the people that these people were vampiring them. They were never serving the people. They're serving themselves under the Inquisition. And the IRS is their collection arm. And the fact that people thought that the IRS is some recent thing that was set up, during the 1913 operations of Woodrow Wilson administration counter Nubu Ali's establishment of the old Canaanite temple to restore the estates of the Moors, particularly in North America, and then to the world. And much of that will be expressed in the divine warning by the prophet to the nations, to wake the people up. And that was one of the major organizational countermeasures to the Inquisition operations of the Popes of Rome and the IRS, which is used even to this day to impoverish the people and to steal their resources and their labors. And of course, people would join labor unions not knowing that the labor unions were actually part of the Vatican. And so you can see over the years how the labor unions have actually betrayed the workers and actually been used against the workers, the workers not knowing that the leaders of these unions were actually in corporate bed with the corporations, and all of them were designed to drain the resources of the people in the name of helping the people. The same way that the priesthood, under the name of the 501c3 Lyndon Baines Johnson Skull and Bones Agreement, thought that they were, tax exempt because they were honoring Jesus and not knowing that actually they were just simply military operations of the popes of Rome for controlling the people, etc. and exploiting them. It's really interesting, and so much of the confusion that people have in relationship to what they thought religion was is in itself an important aspect of study for redeeming, helping to redeem humanity. And again, it's why it's important for people to understand the politics of what they thought was government operating today in these contemporary times is really not in service to the people, but the people themselves were actually being served up by these people, etc. And that death and taxes were causing injury to the people who did not serve the folks of Rome, etc. Were jailed. Now they understand, have a better understanding and comprehension of the POW camps that are actually instituted across the land, and which are really private POW camps of the folks of Rome and members of the Roman Curia under the guise of U.S. government agencies, when actually they're attacks on Aboriginal indigenous people, mainly under Inquisition operations. And that continues to this very day. And so, again, in relationship to people making what we call claim of reversion of their estates and putting all of their property and the fruits of their labor in trust to start protecting it from these pseudo, de facto pseudo government agencies that they thought were creatures of the Constitution and treaties, which they are absolutely not. Once that is comprehended by the people themselves can start intelligently speaking up and stop volunteering into the tithing system of the IRS and making contracts with them that create liabilities against their own estate that the people, for the most part, was not aware that the estate not only included land, air, and water, and their physical property, but also their rights and their liberties, which is again why civics, as a general rule, has not been taught. Or you'll see people who are party to the dark priesthood will condemn anyone who teaches civics and constitutional principles because it exposes the fraud of the circle, church, and chancery of the chambers of hell coming from the Vatican that is operative in almost every government on the planet. And of course, this is why, again, why as they have drained all of the labor and resources from the people, that you have the institutions that the people have trusted in, invested themselves in, collapsing because they pretty much drained the carcass and now they're ready to sacrifice the people. People need to know that that's what the agenda is under the guise of New World Order. And so again, just like when you see the letter, when the letter to Pope from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, they'll close out. I'll read the first paragraph and the last paragraph of the letter. And those of you who've been sharing with us in the House of Reawakening Minds, you'll find this letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama. You'll find it on your flash drive. And so I'll share the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Pope Francis sends Obama powerful letter via attorney, July the 4th, 2014. Civil orders, July the 4th, 2014. This letter is issued to all members of the domestic police forces, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Provost Marshal, members of the American Bar Association, and the American Armed Services. And these organic American states of the Union, known as the United States of America, Major, exercising plenary civil power upon the land, hereby appoint General Carter F. Ham to lead and command the Grand Army of the Republic, with the acronym GAR, and its successors under the guidance of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with their full support. Now I'm going to read the last paragraph to this letter. And again, those of you who are sharing with us on the House of Reawakening Minds can refer to your flash drive and get the letter in full. And you'll see how this relates to Alamo's statements and also the historical facts that we've been sharing with you all over the years, etc. But this would give you insight into the concepts and the misinformation platforms that have been presented in the social fabric lately. All legal fiction entities, however structured and named after the American states and the American state citizens, are returned to them and their control free and clear of any debt, promise, encumbrance, or obligation alleged against them as a result of false claims made in their behalf, quote unquote, by officers of the United States of America Incorporated and the United States Incorporated, all capital letters, or by any foreign officials operating the United States of America minor or the United Nations city-state falsely claiming to quote unquote represent them or to have jurisdiction over them. We note that the current circumstance is in part the result of criminal acts engaged in 150 years ago, which resulted in the commercial enslavement of African Americans who were summarily claimed as chattels back in U.S. government debt in wake of the Civil War. And despite every act of abolition and declaration of prohibition against both peonage and slavery, it has been the policy of the U.S. government to enslave its citizens and to operate as a rogue state among the nations of the world. And instead of freeing African Americans, the sum total result of the Civil War was to vastly expand public sector ownership of slaves, giving rise to the outrageous and improper claims that have been made against the American states and the American state citizens that we are dealing with today. It is uniquely fitting that the Grand Army of the Republic is recalled to settle this circumstance in favor of the people. Attachments: Civil Orders, Anna Maria Wilhelmina, Hanna Sophia Ritzinger von Ritzenstein von Letlow Burbeck, private attorney in service to His Holiness Pope Francis, documents. The United States isn't a country, it is a corporation, the hidden Vatican Crown Empire. This is included in the letter sent to Barack H. Obama. And you will find this letter on your flash drive that most of you have gotten from Dr. Naila on the House of Reawakening Minds. And you can read it in full yourself and see it in harmony also with what was shared with Alamo in his article that he wrote during the Reagan administration, which I shared with you, etc. And so you can see today people are becoming more and more conscious of the real and actual politics that has actually been injuring the people, not supporting the people. It's actually been robbing the people, not supporting the people. That has actually been criminally stealing the people's estates and their labor, not serving the people. But in fact, we're serving the people up to injury, serving people up to poverty, serving the people up to torture, serving the people up to human trafficking, etc., and bloodletting, etc. In fact, up to this very day. So we have a lot of work to do in relationship to helping to liberate fallen humanity, which is why some of these subject matters that a lot of people won't deal with, we deal with them at the House of Reawakening Minds, with the uplifting of fallen humanity. And this gives you some insight into the politics that you see taking place around the world. And a lot of these constructed, planned, and strategically executed so-called race problems that they're having around the planet to cause division and destruction, etc. These are inquisition operations. Yield the floor to you, Dr. Nail.
I'm going to look to see if there are any burning questions that you like. There are a lot of comments, but while I'm looking, this will be a good time for any questions. I know some of you have been writing in the chat, but unfortunately, what happens as the chat responses come in, some of the older ones I can't get to. So I'm
Yeah,
trying
because
to.
we apologize for not being able to respond to all the chat because there's so many people from around the world that listen to the House of Reawakening Minds. And of course, we can't get to all of them, so we try to deal with answering some of the generalized overall questions and concerns of the people to the degree that we can share any thoughts of for helping or uplifting the people. But again, one of the problems that we had was that, again, that the people, many of the people just didn't know that the United States is not a country. That it's a private corporation belonging to the Popes of Rome that has been occupying under Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere. And that would include Canada Corporation and the United States Corporation operations, then branched out against the rest of the people of the world. That's the truth. Unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. So, for us to solve problems, both political and economic of the world, we got to know the source of the problem. And much of that source has been shared with you tonight. Not that it hasn't been shared with you before, but because when you see a lot of your hybrid Europeans, and priests starting to tell some of the truths because they're being injured now too. That gives people encouragement to, or helps people to be encouraged to start studying and researching for themselves and not accepting what we say without research. We always encourage you to do your own study and research and find out for yourself. Logically, as your minds change due to being made aware of things that prior to exposing of these things, some of you didn't know, the changing of your mind will change the conditions and the way that you communicate with a lot of these agencies that you thought was government and discovering that they're actually circle church curia members of the Vatican that were actually waging war on you, the people. And a lot of people that thought that these agencies were just waging war on the Aboriginal people have found out that they've been sacrificing them, etc. And this is again why you see a lot of the hybrid Europeans starting to tell a lot of the political truths that would not be in the mainstream news venues, etc., because they're being thrown under the bus. But it also demonstrates to you that they knew this stuff all the time. But when they were benefiting from the fraud of the U.S. democracy, they weren't telling our people anything, were they? They were talking about, vote for this platform, vote the Democratic Party, etc., not knowing that these were actually Klan members of the Knights of Columbus under the Vatican operations to actually overthrow the Republic, which is why you won't see the political operatives under the Vatican order refer to the Republic order of the Constitution. They will always refer to the U.S. democracy, which is actually a demon platform for the papacy. And of course, we don't have to tell you about the injuries that they've been causing on the people because the evidence is self-evident. You don't even have to do deep research. All you got to do is go to all the communities and look at the miseries and the suffering and the broken families and the drug problems and the alcohol problems and the people being murdered on the street by people that they thought were law officers, etc. And now these are operations of Rome. The setup. Unfortunate truth, but it's the truth. You can't fix anything if you don't start recognizing what the origin.
Here is a question.
Yeah.
Speedy Bay, how can we do the reversion of the state as individuals prior to / while forming government structure?
It's sort of like once you start cleaning things up, it's like things fall in place. We don't need to so much reinvent the wheel. We need to clean the wheel up, clean the wagon up, and take it out. As an example, let me give you an example. People not knowing the true history of Iberia or Europe, etc., are under the in general impression that after Napoleonic Wars, their perception is that Europe is dealing mostly with Albion Paleolithic Europeans, or what we call modern man, when in fact the original Europeans are Iberians, etc., or Moors. Picts, the Dubs, the Moors. That's why when you do research into Phoenicia or Iberia, which is actually the European peninsula, you'll see all the coats of arms of the nobles that were overthrown. And you're going back to Napoleon and the Napoleonic Wars, you'll find that they were all Moors. All the coats of arms. And then those of you who do have some, what you would call relatively comprehensive libraries, you can go into some of the work of Joel A. Rogers, who's one of the most awarded scholars of Nature Knows No Color Line. And you will also see the coats of arms of Iberia or Europe, and they're actually Moors. George Massey is another scholar
Gerald
whose work,
Gerald Massey.
Gerald Massey, yeah. And there's others, but most of our people have been, spooked away from, reestablishing libraries because the church, through the Popes of Rome, have been for so many years burning books, banning books, with their expurgatorius and prohibitorum policies of the Inquisition. And so in the last maybe 7 or 8 generations of the Aboriginal people, contrary to our own culture, very few of our people have libraries in their homes anymore. And then they only, by training, have only been accepting, say, Bibles, Korans, and Torahs as the only books that they were allowed to read. And so their concepts are usually corrupted or wrong by virtue of not having a balanced knowledge of the traditions and customs from which these books, that they call holy books, have their origin. And so it has allowed the the papacy operators of the Roman Curia to misrepresent the books to the people, and which has caused a lot of the schism and secularism that people have been suffering from, in society, and this disorder and disruption and this falsely grounded hatred in the name of religions, because people don't get religion, they get dogma. That also must be corrected by the scholars and the people who have goodwill for humanity to tell the truth. And so the truth was told not to reject anyone, but to put things back in their proper perspective so that the people have a true perspective of names of lands and peoples prior to colonial inquisition operations, etc. Whereas much of the knowledge was suppressed and the real history was reconstructed. And they'll call it reconstruction. And people think they're talking about buildings when they're really reconstructing society. And much of this reconstruction has taken place since the Napoleonic Wars, but has accelerated since the mid 1800s. Now that's a fact. And of course, going back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers will aid you in correcting your concepts about humanity and about the nations of the earth and about international interchange and international trade, which is at the root of much of these wars that the hybrids have been waging and having much to do with their privacy operations and their piracy operations through bottomry instruments like the marriage certificates and the birth certificates bond system created by the Jesuits of Rome to steal the people's estates and their inheritances, etc. And that's again why all of it is done under admiralty and maritime law, because they're not really the people of the land. This is in the constitutions and treaties are dealing with what you call law of the land and the jurisdiction of the land. So they take the people out to sea only on paper through what you would call linguistic and connotative instruments, and capitolium or capital. This is why they use the capital letters when they make reference to people and trick people into volunteering their states to the U.S. corporation that they thought was a legitimate government. It's really the private corporation of the Jesuit order who answers to the Pope of Rome with the support help of the barristers of the British Accredited Registry from Fleet Street, England, which most of you already know. And this is where that tie between Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, Queen of England, and the Vatican, with those three stars, that's what that's all about. Modern day Inquisition enforcement by the IRS, stealing the people's resources and draining them, then sacrificing them. And so death and taxes, death of your life, of your political life, via the IRS and via three-letter government agencies, etc., and the taxation imposed, which is disguised tithing to the popes of Rome, all of it is a fraud. Therefore, it is not inevitable. And logically, this is again why the brand system was instituted, to take the people out of their proper person, by which they can declare the people civilly dead, though they were not physically dead. And this is where the term civil livor mortuus comes in. And of course, the 14th Amendment person, or the man of straw, that people refer to as the all capital letters. And also why the all capital letters is not used, and why when they present an instrument to you in the all caps, they're making reference to the admiralty, maritime, or fictional estate that they created on the seas. And this is, again, they go from SEAC to SEEC, the Holy See, of the Pope of Rome pretending to be Horus, or imitating, or what you call calling themselves the vicar or the substitute. So everything they do is really what you would call a fictional substitute of reality. And this is where deception comes in. That's why you don't use the all caps.
I just want to interject. When people order USB drives,
Mm-hmm.
and the system we use through PayPal to create the mailing labels, put the information in all lowercase or initial caps or all lowercase.
Yeah.
When it comes out as a label, it's all caps. You can't change it. You can't.
They make it.
You can't. You know. So I want folks to know that when they get an all caps mailing label, I didn't all cap it.
Yeah, they will do
the
that.
The system automatically all caps it.
This is what people need to know, that that the heads of the post offices, etc., are Roman Curia members, and that is done within. And all the institutions have been infiltrated. This is again why it's important for people at large to become cognizant of what's going on, so that you, the people, can yourself start talking about reversion of the state. And this is also where Noble Drawley, the illustrious prophet of these days, make reference to the lost estate and the restoration of your birthright, your nationality, and your birthright. And logically, once you understand birthright, you must understand that you're dealing with civil issues of estate and inheritance if you're going to deal with these matters. Then, of course, you understand trust. Why trusts are so vital in relationship. And also why when these de facto and pseudo men and women running these pseudo government agencies write to you through the mail, through the U.S. mail, and they have a corporation name in all caps that they're actually attacking you. You need to know that. And most of you need to learn how to write rich, because rich just means written instruments, and you rebut that for them to correct that. Because actually, what they're doing, you're talking to the dead. They're claiming you dead. Now let's back to the Inquisition operation, and it's done through U.S. agencies because the U.S. agencies actually are the Vatican. Here we go.
Here's a question from Mentimore L. Wants to know about France versus United States, 1952.
France versus?
Yeah, France v. United States, 1952.
Oh, where they made claim, and they're making claim on territories in the north, etc. And in fact, the United States corporation actually lost in that claim. You know that, right?
No, I didn't
Oh,
know
yes,
it.
people need to know that. Yeah, there was a case that come for the international venues, and the U.S. really lost. And of course, they won't teach those things in the public because logically it would expose that these people who have been governing you are de facto, and the concepts that they've taught you in history is also
So what was the case? What was the case based on? What was it?
claims on the land, claims of the land,
So was
claims
it
of jurisdictional.
was this France, the so-called country, or was it someone whose name was France?
Yeah, France. And the United States presenting itself, their owners presenting it as a country, when in fact it's a private corporation. Of course, they lost, but they won't speak on that because it again exposes the fraud. And as a matter of fact, in the future we'll go over that case as a commentary in the future into details for the benefit of the people. Because that's a study within itself.
How do I get the flash drive and be approved? House of Ram. I've been posting. People are asking about the flash drive. If you look, it's the USD drive that every time you see me put up USD, I'm telling you how to order. So when you see that banner, I'll put it up again. And you're part of House of Reawakening Minds just because you are who you are. We don't have a membership organization.
It's a state of political affairs.
State of being is B. Is B, and you are.
Yes.
That's the best way I can explain that.
Because the major, it's sort of like Noble Drawley says, he came to make you priests unto yourselves. In other words, the real deal of it is part of the work of Noble Drawley is actually to expose the corruption of the priesthood and present such knowledge as would liberate the people to become their own priests. Because they only lack knowledge. And that's the truth. And this is why a lot of people get confused when they become aware of the Moorish movement. They get confused about different people making different statements about Noble Drawley, and they start worshiping him rather than paying attention to what he said when he actually came to liberate us and to redeem us from ignorance and from the lower self-principles of character by taking us back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers and putting us on a path of study that will reveal a lot more than you think that you know. That's why also he said the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you go back to sleep. And those of you who over the years started going into the scholarship, start recognizing immediately how deep in darkness we were, and how deep in darkness and ignorance many of your family members were that you may have assumed to be intelligent, that we were building our lives around a false paradigm for generations. And of course, that caused injury, schism, and destruction to our families and to the youth. However, it's our duty and responsibility to take responsibility and start fixing this thing. If you're breathing, you still can achieve.
Let me see. Here's some where's that? Questions. Someone wants to know.
Now, for those of you who have that the letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama, this is where the nations of the earth, as we've been telling you all for the last 7 or 8 years, that the nation of the earth would stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, then you'll understand the bonding system that was set up in 1861, what the Pope was making reference to about that 150 years ago, criminality, etc. And so by the bond systems, by the nations stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, which are actually put on the backs of the Moors, etc., who they tagged as African Americans, when Africa is America. America is Africa. And that's the truth. The deal of it is that the nations stop buying them. And so this is really, again, one, and it's not just the buying habits. It's another one of the reasons why many of your malls at North America started closing up. Those master malls all over the place because they could not re-up, meaning that the nations gradually stopped accepting trade under the U.S. corporation private commercial paper petrodollar tied to the priesthood of the bishoprics of Rome, etc. So you've got to recognize that the nations of the world look at the U.S. Federal Reserve note differently than the people here do, because they already know that it's a fictional instrument of private debt fakery put upon the people by force of arms, and that it actually belongs to the Jesuits, which is another basic reason why that no accounts opened up with Federal Reserve notes belong to the people that count. It belongs to the banks. Is again why they can go into those accounts and take people's fiat that represent their labor trade at will without the people having any say so. And this is also why they can do things to the people, considering them as dead under the unum sanctum operations, and force nanovirus marks upon them under vaccines, etc., because they're claimed as dead in the first instance. This is again why it's important for people to make public reversion of the state, and it has to be in appropriate persona in their proper. And that's back to nationalization and principles of nationalization all over the world, not just here at North America. However, North America is the most destitute in relationship to knowledge of pedigree and traditions and customs. This is another reason why so much of this information is focused on the Moors of North America. Not because you're the only one, because you need it the most, actually.
Someone asked, who's a whore? Who's I don't want to mess with the appellation. What is the relationship with Hagia Sophia in relation to the Moors? It looks like Moorish architecture.
Sophia?
Yeah.
So you're looking at Hagar?
No, the structure.
The dome.
The dome, yeah, in Turkey. It's
on the borderline.
But so it looks like Moorish architecture.
Of course it is. Of course it is. There's no secret. That's really no secret.
So the relationship to the Moors built it, constructed it, right?
So you're looking at the borderline between Asia and Africa. That's on the borderline. And you go back to the battles between Hannibal, Hasdrubal, Barca Bey, etc., and the military clashes between the Constantinians hiding under the name of Christian. You gotta remember, Muslims are Christian.
Well, they say it was built as a Christian.
They say so. And you'll see it going back over the centuries, going back and forth.
as a Christian basilica.
In these wars. Then it'd be a mosque. Then it'd be a church. Then it'd be a temple. Then it'd be a mosque, church. You'll see the history.
It'd be Negro, black, colored, African American.
It changes a lot of history.
Changes a lot.
It exposed a lot of history. Yes, it will.
Rush L says, how do we replace fiat? You know I can answer that, but go ahead and answer that.
Fiat is related.
How do we replace it? How do we replace it?
You don't replace it. You claim your estate. See, the work that's going on today all over the world is the restoration of the lost estate of humanity. And when you see so much focus put on the Moors of North America, it is because we are the hub of the target of the Inquisition. It just spread to others. But the foundation of the Inquisition operation was against the Moors. And then you go to the Spanish Inquisition, the Roman Inquisition, and you go to the Napoleonic Wars, etc., and they all lead to attacks of the Khazarians, guised or pretending to be Jews, attacking the wealthy Asiatic and Africans and taking over Iberia, taking over Europe. And the subsequent wars that you see take place is reflection of those continued wars. They will change the names of both people and lands in order to hide the fact that the problems that you're suffering today, politically and economically, are actually a continuation of the Inquisition, and it never ended. The fact that the people haven't been aware of it, they've been distracted and diverted, their energy has been diverted by Curia members promoting the black codes, making the people think that Africans are black people, when the word is Middle English, actually means pale color. And it has nothing to do with pedigree. It has to do with Navi here, what we call branding or warning, in order to divert the people from the real history and the restoration of their lost estate. And logically, to restore the estates of the people, things must be put back in their proper order. And again, that has much to do with nationalization. So nationalization is not just a document or just the knowledge that these people of dark complexion are actually Moors. It is also the civic knowledge that accompanies it and a true chronology of the walk of man, except it must be restored with the people. And for those people who are honest about much of the work that Noble Drawley did, will tell the people the truth that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is a civic organization. And the religious affidavit was only added in 1928 after the infiltration by J. Edgar Hoover with COINTELPRO operations to create schisms and divisions. Now that's a fact, and you can find that research in the FBI papers and also in the history of American religions.
Here's a question from Hartzell Killen. He says, Taj mentioned Liberia and Tunisia. Can you elaborate in depth? I'm a Liberian.
Yeah. For those who do some research into the congressional records and into the House journals, Senator Balboa, something like that, I'll forget the proper name, etc. Because they were stealing the estates of the Moors here, tried to set up a venue on the east side of Africa, Liberia. That's where that really came from. Liberia is actually Moors from the west that were actually gathered together and taken to the east side of Africa in order to support the fiction that we were brought from there. And of course, we've always had problems with the corruption of the mental corruption of many of the Moors that went to the east side, bringing their corrupted Constantinian minds under the guise of Christianity. And as a matter of fact, during the time period of 93, 4, 5 in that area, I have had many conversations with the brother of the ambassador of Liberia, who used to call me regularly during that time, and we used to discuss some of the problems that a lot of the Liberians were having in relationship to those operations. And as a matter of fact, his brother came to California and he actually started a Moorish Science Temple in California too. That's for information for some of you who don't know. But keep in mind that was really a political colony set up by one of the senators um, to start a process of trying to take a lot of the Moors from this area to that area so they could claim the land. And of course, they've been claiming the land under the Inquisition, ever since. And many of you and your family members can trace back even to your modern generations where the members of the corporate state through the Bar Association have been stealing land that should have been inherited to all of you here. My family suffered that, and I know many of you have those stories. Once you understand that, you'll understand that the hybrid Europeans are not the people of the land, and the U.S. corporation democracy is not legitimate government, but are actually inquisition operations of them stealing your land and your resources. That's the truth, and that's what your relationship is with Liberia.
A lot of
It's a political transplant
that Moors from Mexico, from the north, from here.
Or transport Balboa.
And wasn't that called? Is that called? What is it when they become immigrants? Not immigrants.
No, they were though they were accepted because a lot of the family on that side already know that America and Africa on that side are both African. America is just the name of this side, Al-Mrak, or Morocco, or Maghreb is simply Morocco, the most extreme west, which is here. And so, but the problem that I find in talking with many of the family is the corrupted mind that many of our people have taken back there in the name of Christianity because of the misinformation that we've been trained with here, and that biased and superior pseudo righteous mindset that they have with that corruption, rather than recognizing the truth of the matter is that we're all one people.
Malik Day says, "How do we write ourselves back in Morocco without the United States?"